Hello, welcome. Welcome to weekly Black History Live with Posha Malcolm. I'm so happy to have each and every one of you with me. And this is the premiere of our first weekly Black History Live. And so I thank you very much for your support. Tonight we'll be trying to answer the question, when did slavery begin and the origins of Black slavery? Before we begin, I just want to say the quote that many of us may know. It is called, "A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." Let me repeat that again. People without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. And this is from Marcus Mosiah Garvey. I will say the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. The question tonight is, when do you think the very first ships carrying enslaved Africans left the continent of Africa? When do you think the very first ships carrying enslaved Africans left the continent of Africa? I'm going to put this question in the chat. There we go. And I'm also going to pin this message. So I'm asking each and every one to, as you come, if you can just, say hello in the chat. And if you can give a thumbs up. I need to reduce this. Let me just reduce this. I want to pin a message in, just a welcome message. Okay, there we go. All right. There we go. All right. Thank you so much once more for joining. As I said before, this is my first weekly Black History Live with Posha Malcolm. I've been creating shorts on Black history, and persons have, left comments that they appreciate it. And so I thought, why not do a live of, Black figures and places? And then I said to myself, we need to begin, with Black history in terms of enslavement and all of that. We need to begin at the beginning. So tonight we are going back to the very beginning to answer, when did slavery start and when did Black slavery begin? To understand Black history, we should start with truth, even the painful parts, because knowledge is power and it sets us free. There's so many arguments that have been going around about Black history. Should we talk about it, or should we, lay it under the carpet? And we're at a very pivotal place in history, because there are so many political things going on with it. I was listening to, I'm not going to call names. I was listening to someone having a panel and discussing it. A lot of persons are uncomfortable with it. For me, this is a topic that I am strong about, Black history, but I try to have a balance in my life. And so I just want to set the stage that as we move into this dimension, that, taking it a step further from shorts and moving in where we can talk about Black history, I just want us to be respectful. I want us to listen to each other's, what we say and what we understand. We may not agree, and that's the beauty about individuality and, collectiveness, that we may not agree with everything that is being said or with nothing that is being said, because everybody have their own. No two people are alike, and no, even in what Black people have been through, they have not been through the exact same thing and have the same feeling. They may go through, this and that, but their feelings, their experience is different. And so I want to lay the foundation that this is where we can learn, we can be inspired. It's not to put anyone down, but it's to uplift humanity. Okay? Before I continue, I want to share that this live, as I said before, is to uplift, but it's also for informational purposes. I'm on a journey of learning about Black history figures and places, and it's pretty interesting, guys. Pretty interesting. And the information I share is based on my findings and research so far. I encourage you to dig deeper, question, and explore along with me. I don't always pronounce every word perfectly, and sometimes I might stumble. But I believe what matters most is sharing the history, the lessons, and the inspiration behind these stories that you have been enjoying. So, thank you for being patient with me as I continue this journey of learning and sharing. Together, we are uncovering Black history one story at a time. Let us begin this journey together. So, when did slavery begin? Slavery has existed for thousands of years across cultures, the ancient Egypt, Rome, you name it. Slavery has been existed. It has appeared in numerous cultures and civilizations throughout history, including ancient Egypt, as I said before, Rome, and various African societies, of course, taking different forms like death, punishment, and the result of warfare. And I am a Christian. And when I read the Bible, it tells that when there's war, the people is usually carried away. So that's a form of slavery when you're being captured and you go and serve. Some what they terms slavery, for debt, you're repaying the debt that you owe and so forth. So it has existed for a very long time. The origin now of Black slavery, which takes it to a different level. When do you think the very first ships carrying enslaved Africans left the continent of Africa? As you come, please say hello in the chat. You can give a thumbs up. So much appreciated, and join the conversation, right? So, when do you think the very first ships carrying enslaved Africans left the continent of Africa? Anyone want to comment? You want to guess what year it was in the chat? Ta-dun, 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 ta-dun. The answer is it happened in 1444 when the Portuguese became the first Europeans to begin capturing and trading enslaved Africans. Yes, in 1444, the turn of the 15th century, African slavery, specifically connected to the transatlantic slave trade. So that is where we are going to really start in our Black history. So in the mid 1400s, Prince Henry, the navigator of Portugal, sponsored voyages along the coast of West Africa. His captains explored and traded for gold, spices, and later human lives. So Prince Henry of Portugal, better known as Prince Henry the Navigator, was a Portuguese prince and a central figure in the early days of the Portuguese Empire and in the 15th century European maritime exploration. So they would go on the seas, because remember, they used to say the earth is flat because they couldn't see over the horizon. So they used to say it's flat. So now they're exploring their, Europe, that part. And to tell you the truth, it was just one. It was just Africa, right? But you have that breaking away. So now you have Europe, right? So they're starting to explore. In 1444, a Portuguese captain named Lazarote de Freitas, I'm not quite sure of the pronunciation, as I said before, so this is one of them. He led an expedition to West Africa. They captured around 235 African men, women, and children. That's a large amount of persons. These were brought to Lagos, Portugal, where they were divided among buyers. So this was the first mass enslavement in 1444. So this Portuguese captain, better known, they call him different names. So one of the names is Lazarote de Lagos. Hope I pronounce it correctly. So he was an explorer and also a slave raider from Lagos, Portugal. Raider, that word, yeah, in Guanin raid. So him captures, I think, get, possession, in capture wherever, him raid it. When somebody just try to get as much as they can get. He was the leader of two large Portuguese slaving raids on the West African coast between 1444 and 1446. How was it documented? A Portuguese chronicler named Gomes Enes de Zurara wrote about this event in his book, The Crónica dos Feitos de Guinea. He described the auction where families were torn apart, with children crying as they were separated from their parents. Where were they taken, though? Where were they taken? Many of the enslaved Africans first went to Portugal itself, and later as colonies grew. So we have someone commenting, hi, legendary movies only. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. Hope you find this live interesting. Thank you so much for joining and commenting. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the first weekly Black History Live. So glad that you have joined us. So they were taken to Portugal itself, And later, as colonies grew, because they're capturing new places, they were shipped to Madeira, the Canary Islands, and eventually across the Atlantic. We'll get into that later on at another live. These Africans were forced to work on sugar plantations, in houses, and later in massive numbers on plantations in the Americas. What began in 1444 grew into a brutal system that enslaved millions over 4 centuries. That's 400 years. So, who remembers the name of the chronicler who wrote about the 1444 slave auction? Can you tell me in the chat, even the first name of the person who documented all of this? So this person saw that families were torn apart with children crying as they were separated from their parents. Do you remember his name or the first in letter? Ta-da, 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 ta-da. All right, so it was Gomez Enes de Zurara. I'm going to put the name in the chat so you can remember. There we go. You can do further research, as this is just for information. You can do your research as well. I encourage you to. Okay. All right. Number 2. What crop were enslaved Africans first forced to grow on Portuguese islands? What first crops were they forced to grow on these plantations? Ta-da, 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 ta-da. It begins with the letter S. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. Sugar. So they were forced to work on sugar plantations, right? In households and later in massive numbers on plantations in the Americas. All right. And the last question, we're almost to close because I don't want it to be long, especially the first day. So the third question and last question is, where did the very first group of enslaved Africans taken by the Portuguese arrive? Where did they arrive? Where did the very first group of enslaved Africans taken by the Portuguese arrive? Ta-da! Do anyone remember? Portugal. So they went to Lagos, Portugal. All right. I'm going to, yes. All right. So to recap what we have gone through on this live, that we answered the question, when did slavery begin? And slavery began from ever since, many thousands of years, right? And we know about the ancient Egypt, Rome, and African societies. Well, Egypt and Rome, to be frank, they're in Africa. The earth is just split up, but it was all one Africa, right? That continent. Now, we answered the origins of Black slavery. And we said that it happened in 1444 when the Portuguese became the first Europeans to begin capturing and trading enslaved Africans. And we know that it was the Portuguese that actually captured these raided, they said they raided, they, traded spices and all these things. So they were explorers, not that they were, well, I'm getting ahead of it. But yes, that the Portuguese under Prince Henry, Prince Henry the Navigator, so he was exploring. And so they would take the sea and they would go out and find new land or land that was there, but they went and they raid and they, see what they could get. Some places they traded, so there were civilizations and all of them. And we learned that these enslaved persons were taken to Portugal and they were put on sugar plantations. And later on, they were even more than the 250 odd persons. They started to capture much more than that and started the slave trade. The story of 1844 shows us how the system of slavery was not an accident. It was planned, recorded, and expanded. But by knowing the roots, we better understand the resilience of those who fought for freedom. And so, is there any comment on what you have heard, what you understand, anything you want to share before we close off today's session of our weekly Black History Live? This is a new era for me. I've never done this before, and I'm a little bit timid, I must say, but confident that we are going to learn, we are going to explore, and we are going to understand more about Black history. As I said before, that this is purely for information purposes. I'm doing my research, I am learning, and I'm sharing with you, and hope that you too can share with me and we can grow together. So, thank you for joining tonight's Black History Live. If this inspired you, make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And thank you so much for subscribing. And welcome. And join me every Tuesday at 9 p.m. as we uncover more Black history figures and places together. Next week, we'll dive into the story of the Middle Passage. I hope you don't miss it. So, see you next week at this time. Have a wonderful evening. Take care. And we will link up on Saturday Night Live. Take care. Bye bye. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate it. And I give you a heart for joining me tonight. Thank you.